One of the earliest writers to explore the ruins and the origin of the Indians was James Adair, who traded and resided among the Indians for some 40 years, where he was encouraged to write a book in 1775 entitled The History of the American Indians. In it, he stated, "As I traded among the Indian Americans, I was forced to believe them, descendants from the Israelites. This descent I shall endeavor to prove from religious rites, civil and marital customs, funeral ceremonies, manners, language, and traditions." There are many early historical books that was making this type of connection, given similar evidence as James Adair did. Another defining experience on my path of discovery here was when I visited Mound City National Park in Ohio. We pulled up in a bus, and we got our film crew out, and I pulled out a map that I was looking at on the bus, which was Squire and Davis's book, which was the first publication of the Smithsonian, The Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. And in it, I turned to this giant earthen construction, which really looks like a Hebrew oil lamp and a menorah. So I asked the park director as we were there where I needed to go to see this giant earthen construction. And the park director stated, well, you can get in your car and you can go down to Milford, Ohio. And there at the crossroads, that is where it was. But the Army Corps of Engineers came in and wiped it clean. And the thought that kind of ran through my mind, well, isn't this America's antiquities? And so who was in a position of power to pull that trigger, to make that call, to really destroy the incredible record of antiquities? And the name that kept rising to the top was a major in the Army Corps of Engineers, Major John Wesley Powell. And so come to realize that he was over mound building exploration, and he was over the ethnology department of the Smithsonian that was looking at the artifacts coming out of these mounds. In the production of our documentary, The Lost Civilizations of North America, we set out to interview the foremost scholars that we could find who had studied these ancient mound building cultures and ancient history. And in so doing, an understanding of this daunting history emerged as we came to realize that this is a larger history than just the loss of America's antiquities, which is huge, or even the exploration of the geography of the Book of Mormon in North America. It is a story of how and why the recovery of this knowledge has been hampered, hidden, and manipulated, and how the provocations were motivated by a myriad of issues facing these early men in science and government in the 1800s, and how it has had a huge effect on the American Indians, and how this history has been handed down to our day. After running the mighty Colorado, John Wesley Powell became a national folk hero. His stories and encounters with the Indians and the Mormons became legendary as he would return to the East and find his professional home in Washington, D.C., where he became director over the Bureau of Ethnology at the Smithsonian and director over the U.S. Geological Survey Department and director over mound building exploration. In these positions, he would have a profound influence on how these ancient artifacts would be classified. Now, John Wesley Powell's biographer stated that the man that understood it was the one-armed little man with a bristly beard, a homemade education and an intense concentration of purpose. When he assumed the joint dictatorship of two bureaus in which he had created, Powell controlled a good part of the science of man and the science of the earth, and he conceived both in the broadest possible terms. It just so happens that John Wesley Powell's father was a Methodist minister in Palmyra, New York, when the Book of Mormon came off the press. Now, Powell's life really shadowed the migration of the early pioneers and saints as they migrated from western New York into Illinois and then on to Utah. Now, another of Powell's biographers, Donald Worcester, gives us this insight. Powell's life is also a story of the rising influence of the natural sciences and of rationalism contesting the faith of traditional religion, and of a new nationalism and secularism taking its place. As he was coming of age, science was rising to influence the study of nature and culture, and even the making of laws. In his day, science meant, above all, geology, evolution, and Darwinism. The context of these ideas of what is now called religious fundamentalism for the supremacy of the American mind was mirrored in Powell as nowhere else. Lewis Henry Morgan, the American father of anthropology, who has been credited with advancing social Darwinism to the American culture, after meeting with evolutionary theorists Charles Darwin and Sir John Lubbock in England, Morgan returned home to write his most notable works, Ancient Society, where he came up with what he called the stages of human evolution, that man evolved from savagery to barbarism onto civilization. Seeing the Indians as savages, seeing fundamental religiousness as barbaric on this course towards a more civilized state. Now, both Morgan and John Wesley Powell, was from the Rochester, Palmyra area. And both of them would come together in Buffalo, New York, and to organize the American Association for the Advancement of Science, in which both of them became president over that organization, where they worked to elevate science in a very real sense above religion. Now, Lewis Henry Morgan became a mentor to John Wesley Powell. Powell's inspired by the writings of Morgan on these stages of human evolution, began to realize that he could use these evolutionary concepts into the origin of man as a tool for social reform. Powell's conviction that every variant could be placed somewhere on this evolutionary stairway gave direction and systems to Powell's work in ethnology. Emerging from this evolutionary stairway would be the enthronement of Darwinism, creating a whole new vision for society, as they would begin to view the origin of man and the origin of society through this lens of evolutionary thought, changing how society has come to view and value the American Indian, and many other things in our culture today. I mean, if you're looking through the evolutionary lens, how do you value children in the world today? Do you see children as divine creatures touched by the finger of God, or are they just another animal in the animal kingdom? How about marriage and family? Is that divine, or is it just traditional? Along with many other societal norms. If you're looking through the evolutionary lens, it changes a lot of things found in society today.